and had always tried to avoid trouble, but today was different. As she walked down the dimly lit hallway, she felt to SH. Ver run DW and her spee, ni, her bua lie. With a SMRK on his face, had just shed into the cabin of the most feared professor on campus, Professor Kim Taehyung. Known for his unpredictable temper, Professor Kim's cabin was the last place anyone wanted to be locked in. The door clicked shut behind her, and In's heart raced. She turned to find Taehyung staring at her with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. YN swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. I was locked in here by someone," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room for an escape. Taehyung's eyes narrowed as he took a step. Sir. Locked in? By whom? He asked, his tone softening slightly. As In explained the situation, she noticed a flicker of something in Taehyung's eyes. Was it concern? Despite his fearsome reputation, there was something about him that made her feel safe. You're certain it was him? Taehyung asked, his gaze at Euro knees as he and Ned against his desk. In nodded, her pulse still racing. Yes, it was him. He and his friends have been bothering me for months. Taehyung's expression rickened. He knew the type. Boo, IEs who Rev Euro led in the power they thought they held over others. But this time they had picked the wrong target and the wrong place. Don't worry, he said, his voice firm. We'll sort this out, but first we need to get out of here. The cabin was filled with the faint scent of old books and a hint of something else danger. The air was CK with unspoken secrets and the whispers of past experiments, and felt the tense uncoil in her stomach, but she also felt a strange comfort in Taehyung's presence. We need to find a way out before anyone finds out. You're here, Taehyung murmured, his eyes scanning the room for anything that could help. Why Nu nodded, her eyes following his. She spotted a window high up on the wall, but it was small and covered with a heavy, dusty curtain. What if we climb out the window? She suggested, hope sparking in her voice. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, considering the option. Then with a nod, he misvied. Swiftly to the bookshelf, grabbed a sturdy-looking chair and placed it under the window. We can try that. But it's a RSK. If anyone sees us, it'll be twice as bad for both of us. With your rumbling hands, Wine helped him dust off the chair and push it into place. Taehyung's strength was surprising, and she felt a FL skr of ADM ration despite the dire situation. They both knew they had to be careful. The last thing either of them needed was to be caught by him and his friends, or worse, the professor himself. As Taehyung climbed onto the chair, he reached for the curtain. The fabric was stiff and didn't budge easily, but with a determined tug, it gave way, revealing the small window. He looked over his shoulder at In, his expression grim. If anything happens, you run and don't look back, understand? In nodded, her heart thudding in her. CHEROST. Taehyung unlatched the window and pushed it open, the cool evening air rushing in. He turned to face her again, his gaze serious. Now, let's do this. Without another word, Taehyung ho stood himself up and squeezed through the narrow opening. Once outside, he reached down to help her up. She took a D Euro PBR Euro ath and stepped onto the chair, her LG shaking. As she climbed onto the windowsill, she could feel the cold stone of the building pressing against her back, a stark contrast to the wapayamthie of Taehyung's hand as he guided her through. Together, they dropped onto the soft grass outside the cabin, the sound of their feet hitting the ground muffled by the surrounding trees. They both took a moment to breathe in the fresh air, relieved to be out of the confined space. Now we need to figure out what to do about Himin and his goons, Taehyung said, his eyes gleaming with determination. Wyan looked at him, her own resolve strengthening. Let's go to the headmaster. They can't get away with this. Taehyung's grip on her hand, TGHT, Ned. Agreed. But we're not going to just tell on him. We're going to make sure he never does this to anyone else again. Are you with me? In nodded firmly. Yes, I'm with you. And with that and unexpected, alliance was born between the bullied and the feared. They set off into the night, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their hearts united in a quest for justice. The path to the headmaster's office was long and winding, CHR uted by the shadows cast by the ancient trees that lined the school's grounds. They moved swiftly, their footsteps silent on the DMP earth. Wyan could feel the wapmpa of Taehyung's hand in hers, his GR. Reassuring and strong. Despite the gravity of their situation, she found a strange comfort in his presence. As they approached the grand, imposing building that housed the headmaster's office, they could hear the distant laughter of him and his friends. It was a taunting melody that fueled their resolve. They had to make this right. With a quick glance at each other, they darted across the open lawn and slipped through a side door, hoping to avoid detection. The corridors inside were eerily quiet, the only sound their soft BRE thing and the copyright king of an old grandfather clock that echoed through the halls. Finally, they reached the heavy oak door that stood between them and the headmaster. Taehyung gave it a firm knock, and the sound reverberated through the quiet space. The door sealed had open, and a stern-looking woman peered out. "Can I help you?" she inquired, her voice laced with suspicion. Yn took a DPBRETH and stepped forward. "We need to see the headmaster. It's about him and his friends. They've gone too far this time," she said, her voice shaking slightly. The woman's eyes softened, recognizing the fear in In's eyes. She nodded and stepped aside. "This way," she instructed, leading them through the dimly lit hall to the headmaster's chambers. As they waited outside, Taehyung turned to In, his gaze filled with a newfound respect. "You're braver than anyone gives you credit for," he murmured. Why managed a small smile, her nerves jangling. "Thank you. I just want this to be over," she replied, her voice a whisper. The door to the headmaster's office swung open, and the stern woman reappeared. "You may enter," she said, her tone no longer suspicious but rather urgent. They stepped into the room, and the headmaster looked up from his desk, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "What's the meaning of this?" he boomed, his voice filling the space. Yen took another deep breath, her hand still clutched in Taehyung's, and began to recount the events of the evening, her voice growing stronger with each word. As she spoke, she watched the headmaster's expression shift from skepticism to disbelief and finally to anger. Taehyung remained by her side, his eyes never leaving hers, a silent promise of support. Together they had turned a moment of fear into a chance for change. The wise reign of Taepai or might just be coming to an end, and in the most unexpected way, with the help of the one person everyone else feared. The headmaster listened intently, his brows furrowing with every detail In provided. When she finished, he let Ned back in his chair and sighed heavily. "This is indeed troubling, Miss In," she supplied, her voice firm. "Miss In, and Professor Kim Taehyung, what do you have to say for yourself?" The headmaster addressed him. "I was as surprised as Miss In when she was brought to my cabin, but I believe her story. Ying has no place here, especially from someone who's meant to be example to his peers," Taehyung said, his voice steady. The headmaster's gaze sharpened. "Very well. I will look into this matter, personally. Professor Kim, I expect you to keep a watchful eye on the situation, and Miss In, I'll make sure that you're protected. Now, let's not have any more of these unfortunate incidents, shall we?" They nodded in unison, and the headmaster waved his hand dismissively. As they exit the room, the $10 iron between them eased slightly, but the weight of what had just transpired remained. They had taken the first step, but the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty. "Thank you," In murmured as they stepped into the hallway, her voice barely audible. Taehyung offered her a small smile. "Don't thank me yet. We still have a long way to go." They walked back to the cabin, the silence between them now filled with a strange camaraderie. The door was still ajar, and Taehyung pushed it open with his foot, his eyes sweeping the room for any signs of him or his friends. The space was empty, but it felt as if the air itself was holding its breath, anticipating their next move. Wyan looked around the room, seeing it with new eyes. The once terrifying lair of the fear professor now felt like a sanctuary she had shared with an unexpected ally. "I can't believe we did that," she whispered. Taehyung turned to her, a hint of a smile playing on his LPS. "Believe it. You're not alone now." Their eyes met, and in that moment, In realized that she had found something. She hadn't known she needed someone who understood her fears and was willing to fight alongside her. They had faced their depths and survived, and perhaps, just perhaps, they had begun to forge a bond that could change the course of their school lives. Forever, the days that followed were tense, with whispers of their confrontation echoing through the hallways. Himin and his friends were nowhere to be seen. But the atmosphere was charged with the anticipation of Redder. Bushin, Taehyung, walked within to her classes, his presence a silent declaration that she was under his protection. The other students kept their distance, unsure of what to make of this new dynamic. But In's fear slowly morphed into something else, a quiet confidence that grew with each step she took. With Taehyung by her side, she no longer felt like the prey, but part of a formidable duo that no one dared to cross. One day, as they were leaving the science building, a figure emerged from the shadows. Himin, his face twisted with rage. His eyes fell on In, and for a second, she felt the old terror flood her veins. But then Taehyung was there, his hand on her shoulder, his voice low and menacing. "If you touch her, I'll make sure you regret it," he warned. Himin took a step back, his bravado momentarily wavering. He knew better than to challenge Professor Kim, and the headmaster's warning still rang in his ears. With a snarl, he turned and disappeared back into the shadows, his minions following like a pack of whipped dogs. Yman looked up at Taehyung, her heart hammering in her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky. Taehyung's smile was gentle. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together." Now, their friendship grew stronger with each passing day. They discovered shared interests, swapped stories of their families and dreams, and slowly, In began to see the man behind their reputation. Taehyung was complex, a blend of fierce intelligence and surprising kindness, and she realized that she had been wrong to fear him. One evening, as they sat in the empty library, surrounded by the comforting silence of dusty tomes, Taehyung spoke up, his eyes never leaving the book in front of him. "You know, In, you're not what I expected either." In's cheeks flushed. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, his gaze in NSE. "You're stronger than you think, and braver. I'm proud to be your ally." The words hung in the air, laden with meaning. In felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm proud to be yours too," she whispered. They sat there for a while longer, the only sounds the rustling of pages and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. But the air had shifted, charged with a new understanding, a bond forged from fear and adversity. As they stood to leave, In looked around the library, the books seeming to whisper their approval. They had faced their fears, stood up to a why, and found an unexpected alliance. And as they stepped into the night, their futures looked a little less daunting because they had each other. The next week brought more challenges, but In faced them with newfound resolve. Together, she and Taehyung had turned the tables on Himin, and now the school was watching. They had become a symbol of hope, a beacon of courage in the face of fear. And as they walked side by side, the whispers of their classmates turned from taunts to whispers of admiration. But it wasn't just the school that had changed. In felt a shift within herself. She was no longer the timid girl who cowered in the face of adversity. With Taehyung's help, she had found her voice and her strength, and as they approached the spot where they had first made their pact, she knew that their story was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more hearts to mend, and perhaps even more secrets to uncover. But she also knew that she wasn't alone anymore. They were in this together too. Unlikely heroes forging a path through the darkness, and as they stood there, under the watchful eyes of the moon, they made another pact to never let anyone, not even fear, dictate their destinies. They were Taehyung and In, the feared professor and the bullied student now, united against the shadows that Lu Pig hid in the school's corridors.